At a wine bar in Chicago, Ethan Cole watched his wife flirt shamelessly with another man right in front of him. But instead of storming out or breaking down, he smiled because everything was already in motion. For 3 years, he had been preparing. Tonight wasn't the end of their marriage. It was the beginning of her unraveling. It started on a Wednesday night at a wine bar in downtown Chicago. Ethan Cole sat quietly at the corner table, his fingers wrapped around a half-full glass of Cabernet. Across from him, his wife Melissa leaned into another man, laughing loudly, touching his arm like Ethan wasn't even there. The man was Ryan Blake, charming, confident, a junior partner at a brokerage firm that hosted too many networking events and had too few ethical boundaries. Ethan had seen him before, heard stories. But this was different. Tonight, Melissa wasn't hiding it. "You're absolutely terrible," she giggled, her voice just loud enough for others to hear. Her hand lingered on Ryan's arm, her wedding ring catching the candlelight. "I can't believe you just said that about Peterson's presentation," Ryan smirked. "What can I say? I call it like I see it. Unlike some people, I don't fake it to keep the peace." The dig was obvious. Melissa laughed harder than the joke deserved. Ethan didn't react. Years of marriage had taught him not to. Every sharp word, every backhanded compliment in public, every sideways glance. He had stopped flinching a long time ago. He studied them both, not with jealousy, but precision. That was what people forgot about Ethan Cole. Beneath the quiet exterior was a mind trained to detect patterns, analyze motives, and track value over time. He did it every day for his clients. Tonight, he was doing it for himself. Melissa leaned closer to Ryan, her tone suddenly lower. "You know, if I'd met you before Ethan, I don't think I ever would have married him." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't flirtation. It was a statement she wanted Ethan to hear. And he did. Ryan didn't even pretend to be subtle. He glanced at Ethan with a smug grin, then back at Melissa's chest. "Well," he said slowly, "lucky for me, some guys don't know what they have until it's already gone." The wine bar went silent just long enough for Ethan's hand to clench around his glass. Then, without warning, he stood and delivered a clean, practice punch that caught Ryan square in the jaw. The man flew back, chair tipping, glass crashing, gasps, a scream. The room froze. Melissa shot up, stunned. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shrieked, grabbing at her wine, which spilled across the table. "You've lost your mind!" Ethan flexed his knuckles, unfazed. Ryan scrambled to his feet, red-faced and unsteady. "You crazy son of a—" "Finish that sentence," Ethan said, calm and quiet. Ryan's jaw snapped shut. Something in Ethan's voice cut deeper than the punch. For the first time, the arrogant charmer looked uncertain. Melissa turned the volume up. "If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave? You ruin everything. I was having a conversation and you turned it into some middle school fight." Ethan didn't respond. He simply looked at her. Really looked. The woman shouting in front of a half-empty bar demanding attention wasn't the one he'd married. That woman had been kind, curious, honest. This one? She was a stranger wearing his wife's name. "Say something," she demanded. "Defend yourself." Ethan pulled 3 20s from his wallet and set them next to the broken glass. Always practical, always precise. Then he turned and walked toward the door, Melissa's voice rising behind him. "Don't you dare walk away from me, Ethan!" He didn't stop. Not when the manager intervened. Not when the whispers started. Not even when someone started recording on their phone. He stepped into the cold November air without a backward glance. It was the first time in years that Ethan Cole smiled. Back at their home, Melissa didn't notice he was gone until hours later. By then, Ethan had already packed. Not in a rush, deliberately. He took what mattered. 2 weeks of clothes, documents, his laptop, and a watch his father gave him after college. The rest, he left behind. The apartment, once theirs, felt different now. Lighter, like it was finally his. He moved through the rooms like a man wrapping up a chapter. He didn't leave a note. He didn't owe one. Upstairs, in a locked folder on his laptop, he began gathering what he'd quietly collected over the past 3 years. Bank records, social media screenshots, footage from the discreet security cameras he'd installed after her third girls' weekend. Melissa had called him boring. Safe, predictable. She was about to find out how wrong she'd been. At 11:47 p.m., Ethan made one call. "Nina," he said as his sister picked up groggy. "Ethan, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he replied. "Everything's finally right." Melissa Cole stumbled into the house after 2 a.m., still smelling of red wine and regret. Ryan's jaw wasn't broken, just bruised. That didn't stop him from whining through the entire ER visit like he'd been hit with a crowbar instead of a fist. By the time she dropped him off and made it home, she was exhausted and still furious. She wasn't mad because Ethan punched Ryan. She was mad because Ethan didn't beg afterward, didn't apologize, didn't call. That was unlike him. He was supposed to be the calm one, the fixer, the guy who always smoothed things over, even when she didn't deserve it. But tonight, he walked away without a word. She kicked off her shoes and marched upstairs, ready to find him sulking on the couch, maybe nursing a bruised ego. Instead, she found nothing. No Ethan, no suitcase. His phone charger was gone, his reading glasses, even the cologne she hated, gone. She opened the closet, half empty. She moved to the bathroom. His razor was missing. So were his toothbrush and all the essentials. She checked their joint bank app, 2 withdrawals, precise amounts, one from checking, one from savings. Both well below what he was entitled to take without raising alarms. Panic flickered. Then pride smothered it. She refused to be the one chasing after a tantrum. He'd be back. He always came back. Melissa poured herself a drink and left the first voicemail. By the time she'd passed out on the couch, she'd left 8 more, each one angrier than the last. The next morning, the doorbell woke her. It wasn't Ethan. A sharply dressed woman handed her a thick envelope. "Delivery for Melissa Cole. ID, please." Melissa blinked. "It's too early for... It's legal service. You need to sign." Melissa did, mostly out of reflex. The woman was gone before she could ask questions. She sat at the table, blinking at the envelope. No return address, just her name. Neat block letters. Personal and confidential, open immediately. Inside was a USB drive and a stack of documents. Legal papers, financial statements, timeline entries, photos. She didn't recognize most of the accounts. Offshore holdings, real estate, business shares. She flipped through them, confused. Then she reached the photos. Melissa froze. Every image showed her in a different place, on a different day. Smiling at her personal trainer a little too long. Laughing with the wine bar sommelier while Ethan waited in the car. Touching the arm of the contractor who redid their kitchen. Individually, harmless. Together, a pattern. And then there was the note taped to the USB drive. "Melissa, everything you need to understand your new reality is on this drive. Plug it into the TV. Watch it all. Writes E." Her stomach dropped. The TV flickered to life as she slid the USB into the port. A simple file appeared. "Play me." She did. Ethan's face filled the screen, but not the version she knew. This man was calm, collected, and speaking with a clarity that cut like a scalpel. "Hello, Melissa. If you're watching this, you've received the evidence. What happens next isn't revenge. It's the consequence of your choices." The video cut to the wine bar, captured from a discreet angle. It showed everything. Her touching Ryan's arm, her dismissive comments, her mocking laughter. The moment she said she wouldn't have married Ethan if she'd met Ryan first. Then more footage. Other nights. Other humiliations. Ethan had been recording for years. "For a long time, I convinced myself your behavior wasn't personal, but it was. You didn't just cheat emotionally. You made a habit of diminishing me in public." Melissa reached for the remote, but couldn't move. The screen showed Ethan at his computer, organizing folders. Hidden camera footage of her phone calls while he pretended to sleep. Audio clips from dinner parties where she insulted him in front of guests. Then came the financials. "These are my actual assets," Ethan's voice continued. "The accounts you never asked about. The businesses you ignored. You thought I was a safe. Predictable. Boring. But what you married was someone who lets people underestimate him. It makes things easier." The account balances were staggering. Then came Ryan's turn. "Let's talk about your friend," Ethan said, now standing in a boardroom. I've owned controlling interest in Ryan's firm for 18 months, acquired quietly through a subsidiary, the screen filled with HR documentation and company bylaws. Ryan's behavior violates the firm's conduct clause. I filed termination papers this morning. He's probably reading them now. Melissa's phone buzzed seconds later. A text from Ryan. Did your husband just get me fired? What the hell is going on? She didn't reply. She couldn't. Back on screen, Ethan's voice resumed. You signed a prenup. You didn't read it carefully, but you signed it. It was airtight then. It's even more useful now. Given the evidence, you'll leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Your car, your belongings, and the $50,000 from your savings account. The video ended with Ethan looking into the camera. I wanted you to understand something, Melissa. I didn't change. I just stopped playing dumb. The screen went black. Melissa sat frozen, the USB still plugged in, her coffee gone cold. She wasn't being punished. She was being erased. Melissa Cole wasn't the type to panic, at least that's what she told herself. But by Monday morning, it was clear the damage wasn't temporary. The wine bar incident had gone viral within their social circle. Footage of Ethan's punch, Ryan hitting the floor, and Melissa screaming at her husband had been shared, commented on, and analyzed by friends, co-workers, and even distant acquaintances. At the office, whispers followed her everywhere. In the span of 3 days, Melissa had gone from admired to avoided. What people used to call confidence now came off as cruelty. What used to be considered charm was now labeled manipulation. But the fallout wasn't just social. When she walked into her divorce attorney's office, she was hit with the reality she hadn't prepared for. You signed a prenup that heavily favors your husband, the lawyer explained, flipping through the documents Ethan had served. Combined with the documented evidence of emotional infidelity, you're left with almost nothing. I was his wife for 7 years, Melissa snapped. I deserve more than 50 grand and a used car. The lawyer didn't flinch. Legally, you're entitled to what the contract allows. Morally, that's not the court's concern. She left the office shaken, and not just by the numbers. She was starting to realize she had underestimated Ethan completely. When she tried calling Ryan, he didn't answer. His voicemail was full. His LinkedIn showed he was seeking new opportunities. His social media was locked. By Thursday, she discovered he had moved to Portland and taken a pay cut with a new firm. She sent him a text. Can we talk? He replied 2 hours later. Not a good idea. I'm dealing with enough already. Don't contact me again. Melissa stared at the screen, stunned. Ryan, the man she'd humiliated her husband for, had vanished the moment the consequences arrived. Meanwhile, Ethan wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. The rumors started small. A photo here, a mention there. Then a full social post. Ethan, smiling across a candlelit table, holding hands with a woman Melissa didn't recognize. Sarah Martinez, beautiful, poised, and apparently very successful. Finance consultant, Ivy League grad, fluent in 3 languages. The kind of woman who didn't need Ethan's money, but respected his mind. A colleague of Ethan's posted, "Great seeing Ethan at the gala last night with Sarah. Power couple energy." Melissa's stomach turned. Then came the final blow. The same charity gala she'd planned to attend for months, the one she was convinced would help her reclaim her reputation, was now Ethan's stage. She arrived late, wanting to avoid the cameras. But as soon as she walked in, all eyes turned, some with sympathy, most with judgment. Then she saw them. Ethan and Sarah, side by side, moving through the crowd like they belonged there. Ethan looked different, lighter, confident, like a man who'd shed years of dead weight. Melissa approached them. She had no plan, just an urgent need to confront the life that had replaced hers. "Hello, Ethan." He turned. No surprise, no anger, just polite detachment. "Melissa," he said evenly, "didn't expect to see you here." "It's a charity event," she replied stiffly. "I've always supported the arts." She turned to Sarah. "And you must be the rebound." Sarah extended her hand without hesitation. "I'm Sarah, you must be Melissa. Ethan's told me a lot about you." There was no sarcasm, no hostility, just grace. Melissa didn't know how to respond. Only Ethan spoke again. "If this is about the divorce, everything is finalized. What? Her voice cracked. You missed the deadline to respond. Default judgment was issued last week. The room tilted. Before she could protest, the auctioneer took the stage. We have a surprise tonight. Mr. Ethan Cole has pledged to match the highest bid on every item, in honor of his ex-wife, Melissa Cole, and her dedication to the arts. The crowd erupted in applause. Melissa stood frozen, her name now attached to a gesture she didn't make, funded by a man who no longer belonged to her. She turned back to Ethan, unsure whether to cry or scream. He leaned in and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, I told you this was only Act 1. Then he walked away, Sarah by his side. 3 months later, Melissa Cole sat on the edge of a twin mattress in a cramped studio apartment that echoed every time the neighbors argued, which was often. The brownstone was gone. So was the car, replaced by something cheaper and older. She hadn't unpacked most of her boxes. Some part of her still expected to wake up and find it had all been a dream. It hadn't. The divorce was final. The settlement had held. $50,000 in her personal belongings. No alimony. No claim to Ethan's business holdings. Nothing more than what she entered the marriage with. Ethan had erased her, cleanly, quietly, and completely. The people who used to call her for brunch or party invites now barely returned her texts. A few offered polite support in the beginning, but as more details emerged, sympathy dried up fast. Ethan hadn't just outmaneuvered her legally. He'd won the public narrative. In every retelling, she was the wife who traded loyalty for attention. And Ethan? He was the man who quietly took it for years, until he didn't. She thought the humiliation had peaked at the charity gala. It hadn't. 2 days later, Ethan's new girlfriend, Sarah Martinez, was profiled in a local business magazine. The feature included a smiling photo of her and Ethan at a leadership retreat in Vermont. The article called them a powerhouse couple with shared values and vision. Melissa saw the post during a late-night scroll, her only light coming from the cracked screen of her phone. She couldn't look away. They looked real, comfortable, like people who laughed at each other's jokes and didn't have to compete for space. The comments were worse than the image. Former acquaintances, co-workers, even old friends posted things like, Ethan looks so happy now. He finally found someone who gets him. Proof that the right person can change everything. Glad he moved on from the toxicity. That last one hurt the most. Even Ryan, the man she'd risked everything to impress, was nowhere to be found. He'd ghosted her completely after his termination. She later heard he'd tried to sue the firm, but the evidence Ethan presented was airtight. There were rumors of a failed settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. Ryan had gone silent, moved out of state, and blocked her everywhere. No closure, no apology, just another reminder of how thoroughly she'd misjudged everything. Melissa tried dating again, hoping to rebuild her sense of control. But no one stuck around. Most of the men were curious, but when they found out who she was and what had happened, they backed off quickly. Her reputation followed her everywhere, a digital ghost no amount of makeup or charm could hide. At work, she kept her head down. Promotion opportunities vanished. Invitations to company events dried up. People treated her like a liability. She wasn't just the woman whose husband left her. She was the woman who'd lost a chess match she didn't even know she was playing. One Friday night, Melissa received a message from her mother. You settling in okay? Thinking about what's next? She stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Trying to. That was the truth. She was trying not to compare every moment of her life now to the one she had. Trying not to imagine how different things might be if she just appreciated Ethan for who he was. Steady, kind, honest. The same qualities she once found boring were now the ones she missed most. There were no do-overs, no appeals. She'd played the game like it was about excitement and attention. Ethan had played for legacy, reputation, and peace. And in the end, he had all three. She thought about reaching out, thought about sending one last message, something honest, something that would acknowledge what she'd done and what she'd lost. But she never typed it. Some silences, she realized, are earned. Melissa Cole didn't expect clarity to come from a pile of laundry, but one Sunday afternoon, standing in her tiny apartment folding clothes that didn't require dry cleaning, something shifted. This wasn't the life she thought she'd be living at 35. She had imagined international vacations, charity galas, first-class upgrades, and a husband who'd always stay behind the curtain while she took the spotlight. Instead, she had street noise, a second-hand couch, and a grocery list that included dollar store detergent. And yet, she was still here. The shame had dulled into something heavier: responsibility. It no longer felt like life had punished her. It felt like it had taught her something she hadn't wanted to learn. The woman she used to be, the one who rolled her eyes at Ethan's hobbies, who flirted with strangers for validation, who dismissed kindness as weakness, was gone, not vanished, just stripped away. What remained was someone quieter, more cautious, and painfully aware of how easy it was to ruin something good by refusing to see its value. One evening, she came across an old wedding photo tucked into a forgotten folder on her laptop. It wasn't posed, just a candid shot from their honeymoon. Ethan laughing at something off camera, his hand resting on her back like it belonged there. They looked happy, because they had been. Melissa closed the laptop. She didn't delete the photo. She didn't cry. She simply let it sit there like a reminder that not all things lost are worthless. Some are just mismanaged. She had spent the last few months waiting for Ethan to fail, for his new relationship to crack, for some vindicating headline or messy breakup that would prove he still missed her. It never came. Instead, every new post, every mutual friend update, every bit of accidental news painted a picture of someone who had moved on cleanly. Not out of cruelty, not for revenge, but because he'd outgrown her. Ethan didn't just leave the marriage. He left behind the version of himself that tolerated disrespect. And in doing so, he made space for a life that finally reflected who he was: strategic, thoughtful, and deeply loyal to the people who treated him right. Melissa had learned that the hard way. There was no dramatic ending, no final confrontation. Just time moving forward, day by day, like it always does. She started therapy, not to win him back, but to understand herself better. Why she'd chased attention, why she'd pushed away the person who loved her most. The answers weren't simple, but they were honest. Eventually, she took down the wedding photo, not in anger, not in grief, but because she no longer needed a symbol to remind her of what she'd lost. She carried that lesson now in every decision she made. Months passed. One afternoon, Melissa ran into an old coworker at the grocery store. They made small talk, awkward but polite. The coworker mentioned Ethan in passing, said he looked happier than ever. Melissa didn't flinch. She nodded and smiled, even meant it. That night, she made a list of goals, not to rebuild her old life, but to build a new one from scratch. Something real. Something she didn't need to perform for social media or cocktail parties. She enrolled in a class, started freelance consulting, saved her first $1,000 without borrowing a cent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. 6 blocks away, Ethan was cooking dinner with Sarah in their apartment. They laughed over burnt pasta and a playlist of songs they both loved. He didn't think about Melissa, not with bitterness, not at all. That chapter was closed. But for Melissa, it wasn't about reopening the book. It was about rewriting the story she told herself. Not the one where she was the victim or even the villain, but the one where she finally realized the cost of not paying attention to what mattered. She hadn't just lost Ethan. She'd lost the version of herself who might have deserved him. And that, more than the divorce, more than the humiliation, was what she had to live with. But maybe, just maybe, that realization was the beginning of something better.